Hi, welcome to Bakes and Blenders. I'm Colleen, and today we're going to be making these wafer paper roll-up roses. So we're going to be coloring them two different ways and making a bunch of different and adorable sizes. All right, if you're ready, let's get started. Okay, so to make this simple wafer paper rose, we're gonna need some supplies. So the most important thing, of course, is your wafer paper. And I'll post a link in the blog post, and that will also be below. So you need wafer paper, piping gel, sharp scissors. Do not use safety scissors. Learned that the hard way before. Little glass bowls help. Paintbrush. All of my paintbrushes that I use are from Wilton. This one is flat and wide. I like this for this use. For coloring, we're going to use some petal dust. This is also by Wilton. And then you might want some toothpicks on hand. Sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, before we even do get started, you'll notice on your wafer paper, one side is textured, one side is smooth. It does not matter which side you use. Personal preference. So what we're gonna do is the wafer paper comes in like computer paper sized sheets. You're gonna want to trim it down. So this is like 8.5. To a square. Now it does not have to be exact, but I am just a little bit anal, so I use my little grid right here. So you're just cutting off the long end. And set that aside because we will use that later. So now you've got a square, and we're just going to round the corners. And again, this does not have to be exact. Just round them off. Save your scraps. We're gonna use those later. Or we might, I don't know. Okay. So now we've got, it's not really a circle, but a square with rounded corners. And we are going to start cutting a spiral. Now, irregular is good. The outer edge of this is going to end up becoming the center of your rose. So you can make it thin, thick. You can wiggle your scissors, it's up to you. Does not have to be perfect. All right, and then go ahead and set your wafer paper back together with your spiral cut. Whoops. And now we're going to paint it with some piping gel. Just clear piping gel. And as I'm sure you've noticed at this point, that wafer paper can be a little very fragile, and you would not be able to roll it up as it is right now. It would just break. So the piping gel is going to soften it up without dissolving the wafer paper, which water would, so that we'll be able to roll it up into a little rose. Okay. So you can be liberal with this piping gel. I'm sure you can apply too much, but you know, you definitely don't want to apply too little either. So work your way along the spiral so that you don't tear the paper at all. And just brush the piping gel on in a nice even layer. I do like to have a wet paper towel on hand just to wipe your hands off. Okay, so that's done. Now is when you may or may not want a toothpick. So now I'm gonna scooch this. Now we're gonna start rolling it up. Now you can use a toothpick to help the roll started. I usually don't. I do find it helpful you see how it's pointy right there, to snip that off a little bit to help get the roll started. Now you want to try to get this roll as tight as possible. And honestly, it's really weird at first and difficult. But you just keep working on it, it'll get there. Now, as you build up your rows, you need to keep one side flat. So of your strip, the inside part, that's what's gonna be flat. And for a while, it's gonna look like nothing is happening. But as you work your way around and you get more and more wafer paper rolled up, you'll see it start to build up and eventually it'll start to flare out. So try to keep your roll tight and that one side as flat as possible, which is not always easy. If your wafer paper rips while you're doing this, just kind of stick it back on, stick it together. You will cover it up and everything will be just fine. No need to fret. There is a wafer paper rose. Now we're gonna set that aside so that it can dry. Now you're probably gonna wanna add a little bit more piping gel on that last little bit of your spiral so that your flower sticks together. And press down. We're gonna set that aside. I'm gonna put mine on a plate to dry. After about an hour, I like to flip it upside down just so it doesn't stick to the plate. Okay, so we've got our first rows aside and drying. Now we're going to do a smaller one. I'll speed this up so that you can, have to sit around for too long. We've got our scrap of paper and I'm gonna cut it into a square. Get a few squares out of it actually. So just the same, we've got a square. Now we need to round those corners. Cut a spiral. Now because this one is so small, it is gonna be trickier and it might not work. I don't know, but we're gonna try. Then at the very end, add an extra little dab and secure. There's our little one. This time we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna practice making a colored one by mixing a little bit of the petal dust with the piping gel, and we'll use that to paint. So I just have some blobs of piping gel and then a little bit of the petal dust, and you just want to mix. And you can always start with a little bit of petal dust because you can always add some. Now if you do add too much color, you just add more piping gel, no big deal. So it's kind of hard to see since my mat is pink, but I think it's a little too light, so I'm going to add a little bit more dust. All right, you see, pretty nice soft pink. We are going to use that to paint this next roll up rose. And again, we're doing a small one. There is our little pink rose. Okay, I've let my flowers dry overnight. You don't necessarily have to wait that long because they're still not even dry. They're still a little bit tacky. But I'm gonna start painting them. So with just the white, the plain white ones are the ones I'm going to paint. Well, dust. So I've got my pink petal dust, and I've got a fluffy brush. I like to use this one and then this big one. The big one I do for the bigger areas, of course. So let's start with that. I like to concentrate the color in the center of the flower and then work my way out. See how we're coming along? Now, remember when I said that wafer paper has two different sides, a smooth side and the textured side? It does not matter which side you use, but the textured side does pick up on the color a little bit better. So if the textured side is facing into the flower, that's what's going to be getting the color. So there we go. Now I like to add some smaller details in a contrasting color. I've done red, you know, it's like a dark pink. But for this one, I'm gonna try it with a little bit of purple and see how that works. So with a smaller brush, something that's a little stiff and something you can just pick up a little bit of dust on. We're just gonna do in the center, doing some purple. And then on the top of the flower, around the points, we're just gonna gently brush on some color. This just helps add dimension and interest. There we go. Now I'm gonna do this small one in just purple. There's our purple flower. And we're gonna add some gold accents to some of our roll-up roses. So I've got my gold right here and a small stiff brush, and I'm just gonna paint the center of the flower. There we go. To place your wafer paper flowers onto your cake, you're just going to need a few things. Of course, you need your flowers, which I have all of mine right here. You're going to need some frosting in a piping bag, your cake stand, and of course, a freezing cold cake. My cake is still in the fridge, so I'm going to get that out and we'll get started. And I've also got my cake sketch that I'm using just to help me with placement. All right, so take your first flower and put a dollop of frosting right on the back. You can also put your frosting right onto the cake and then add your flour. Now on top it's a little bit easier because you can plan it out a little bit better. And there you go. It's that easy. Now I gotta put this in the fridge to chill some more. All right, now we're gonna add some gold embellishments. I've got my edible gold leaf here. I'm just gonna stick it right on.